She vanished without a trace, and 10 years later, a millionaire found her at his wedding in a chair. Hey there, lovely soul, welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever met someone who changed your life in just one conversation? Today's story is about love that started with a sketchbook, was torn apart by fate, and survived a decade of silence. Let's dive in. He had everything most people only dream of: power, wealth, status, but deep inside he felt hollow. Until he met her, a woman with an artist's heart and eyes that saw the world in her own unique way. Elias Monroe was the CEO of a leading tech company in Portland, Oregon. He lived in glass towers, surrounded by million-dollar deals and high-profile events, yet felt like a stranger in his own life. Leona Carter, on the other hand, was a young artist fresh out of graduate school, working part-time at a cozy art cafe. She painted to survive, and survived to paint. She wasn't glamorous, wasn't famous, but she radiated light. One chance encounter brought them together, and from that moment on, they knew some people you haven't met yet, but when you do, it feels like you've been waiting for them your whole life. This is a story of love, of loss, and of a promise that endured for 10 long years. That rainy afternoon in Portland, Elias Monroe stepped out of yet another exhausting meeting, his mind fogged with numbers and expectations. He had no desire to return to his lavish yet lifeless penthouse, so he wandered down a narrow street until the warm glow of a cafe window caught his eye. The place was called Canvas and Crumbs, where art met pastries. In here, no one cared about job titles or stock prices. Elias chose a quiet corner near the window, beneath an oil painting of the Willamette River winding through the city. And then he saw her. Leona Carter was carrying a tray of pastries and cappuccinos, her curly hair tied up with a few strands falling into her face. A pencil and sketchbook still balanced in her hand. The soft light glowed against her warm brown skin, catching the small nose ring and the natural, unforced smile she wore. She was authenticity in a world Elias had long since grown disillusioned with. When a distracted customer bumped her, sending her sketchbook tumbling, Elias picked it up. On the page was an unfinished drawing of the cafe, captured from a bold, unusual perspective that conveyed both serenity and the city's quiet chaos. "You've drawn the soul of Portland," Elias said, almost involuntarily. Leona raised an eyebrow, equal parts skeptical and amused. "That's either the cheesiest thing I've heard today, or you actually know something about art?" "Yale, art history, before I became a reluctant CEO," he replied with a small smile. They spoke for only a few minutes, but it felt deeper than most conversations Elias had had in years. When she offered him her hand, it wasn't just a handshake. It was a door quietly opening from one soul to another. And Elias knew something inside him had just shifted. After that first encounter, Elias began frequenting Canvas and Crumbs so often that the staff started calling him the window guy. But only Leona knew the real reason. He came for her. She invited him to her student showcase, where her paintings depicted Portland not as a postcard city, but as it truly was. Street musicians, weathered rooftops, faces full of both hope and fatigue. Elias stood silently in front of one piece, then whispered, "You see what the world forgets to look at." From then on, they started stepping into each other's worlds. On rainy days, Elias brought Leona to his mother's private gallery, a space filled with art his mother once loved. On late nights, Leona taught him to paint, not to become an artist, but to hear his own heart again. He loved her not because of their differences, but because she brought him closer to the man he forgot he was. She loved him not for his wealth or success, but for how he supported her quietly, without judgment, always seeing her like she was everything. One spring evening, Elias led Leona to an empty gallery he had reserved. Inside, he had secretly displayed 12 paintings he'd created himself, each capturing a moment from their love story: their first coffee, the afternoon they sketched under the rain, her smile the first time they held hands in public. The final painting showed something that hadn't yet happened: 2 hands intertwined, with a glowing chapel in the distance. He stepped forward, opened a small ring box, and said softly, "I don't just want to love you today. I want to love you in the ordinary days, in imperfect moments. Leona Carter, will you marry me?" She cried and nodded, not because it was a perfect proposal, but because it was real. The wedding day arrived with the soft golden glow of autumn. A small chapel tucked in the woods outside Portland had been decorated with wildflowers and Leona's own paintings. Guests slowly filled the pews. Two families, one modest, one affluent, laughing, mingling, sharing joy. Elias, in a simple suit, stood at the altar, heart pounding with anticipation. In the bridal suite, Leona wore a dress she had designed herself. Simple, artistic, and wholly her. She smiled nervously, then paused in front of the mirror. "I'm really getting married," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Then her phone rang. Not her main phone, but the backup one she only gave to family. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Leona Carter?" A firm male voice asked. "Yes." "This is Agent Daniel Sullivan, FBI. You need to listen carefully. This is a matter of life and death involving Elias Monroe and your sister's husband." Leona froze. In a matter of minutes, her world shattered. Marcus, her sister's husband, was linked to a smuggling operation under federal investigation. Elias, due to a recent business acquisition that unknowingly disrupted the cartel's routes, was now on their hit list. The plan? An assassination, today. You cannot tell anyone, not your family, not your fiancé. If they suspect a leak, Elias dies. We've tried to contain the threat, but new intel just came in. We're out of time. You have to disappear, now. With no time for tears, Leona grabbed her purse, turned to her bridesmaids and said, "I just need a minute to breathe." That was the last time anyone saw her. That day, Elias waited 3 hours at the altar. No message, no explanation. Every call, every text met only silence. As guests trickled out, as the chapel emptied and the sun dipped below the trees, Elias remained frozen in place, still believing she might return. But she didn't. When the police got involved, they labeled it cold feet. Maybe she panicked. Maybe she changed her mind. But Elias knew. Leona wouldn't have left like that, not without saying goodbye, not her. Days later, her apartment was found partially packed, a few personal items gone. Her backup phone, the one used for emergencies, was discovered in a trash bin blocks from the chapel. No leads, just absence, as if she had vanished from the world. Elias began the search. He hired private investigators, pulled traffic cam footage, tracked bank records, reviewed flight logs. Nothing. In those first months, he unraveled. Sleepless, starved, work neglected. But from the wreckage, something steadier emerged. Not a man moving on, but a man determined to find a new way to reach her. He created the Leona Carter Foundation, supporting young artists and people with disabilities, the life she had dreamed of building. Each year, the foundation hosted an exhibition called Voices Unseen, where Elias hoped she might attend, or at the very least, know that her name lived on. In year 2, a painting arrived at the gallery, unsigned, depicting a Portland street corner. The brushwork, the colors. Only one person could have painted it. No name, no note. Just a tiny, hidden symbol in the lower corner. Orion's belt. Their secret mark. Year 5 brought another piece from Tokyo. Year 7, a seascape traced to Cape Town, all bearing that same touch, that same whisper. I'm still alive. Others would have let go, but not Elias. Because he knew she didn't leave to escape him, she left to protect him. And if she was still out there, somewhere in this vast world, he would find her. 10 years later, at a charity art auction in Seattle, Elias entered the gallery like he always did. Sharp suit, polite smile, but eyes constantly scanning corners, searching between canvases and unfamiliar faces. And then he saw her. Tucked near an exit, a woman sat in a wheelchair. Her hair was short, her face gaunt, a pale scar running along her left cheek, but Elias knew her instantly. That gaze, those eyes, the way she tilted her head while studying a painting. It was Leona. His heart stalled. He moved toward her, step by cautious step. "Leona," he said softly. She froze, not turning, though her hand trembled on the armrest. When she finally turned to face him, their eyes met, and time held its breath. "You weren't supposed to see me," she whispered. "I just wanted to see you, one last time." "No," Elias said, voice thick with emotion. "You don't get to disappear again." He gently persuaded her into a private viewing room, away from the crowd. Under soft lighting, the truth unfolded, shards of a decade-long mystery finally falling into place. That day, Leona had answered Agent Sullivan's call. Marcus, her sister's husband, had been laundering money for a global smuggling ring through art sales. When Elias acquired a shipping company, he had unknowingly destroyed one of their key routes. And so, he became a target. The FBI demanded Leona vanish, no contact, no explanations, to protect Elias and preserve their investigation. 6 months turned into a year, then 2. Then came the explosion in Bangkok, a car bomb not meant for her, but one that left her scarred, unable to walk. "I wanted to come back," she said through tears, "but after everything, I'm not the same me you once loved." Elias took her hand, gently but firmly. "I didn't love who you were 10 years ago. I love you, here, now. You're still my Leona, no matter where you've been, no matter what's changed. I still choose you." The morning after their reunion, Elias stood outside room 412 of the hotel, his hand trembling slightly. 10 years ago, he had waited for her at the altar. Now, he was waiting for her to open a door. The door opened, and there was Leona. No makeup, eyes swollen, one hand on the doorframe, the other resting on her wheelchair. "You came," she said, as if unsure it was real. "I told you I would." She rolled back slowly. The room was simple, a half-packed suitcase, a few old sketches scattered across the desk. Elias sat across from her, his hands clenched together. "Were you planning to leave?" he asked gently. Leona nodded. "I thought, if I left early, it would be easier, for both of us." "I ended my engagement," Elias said, straight to the point. Leona turned, visibly stunned. "I couldn't keep pretending I was capable of living a life without you," he continued. "Natalie is wonderful, but you are home." Leona gave a short laugh, tinged with tears. "Elias, I'm not the woman you used to love. I don't run through the rain anymore. I don't dance around galleries. I sit in this chair. I take medication every day. Some nights I don't sleep because of the nightmares. Some days I can't even leave my room because I'm terrified of being seen." Elias stood and moved closer. "And I'm still here, not because you're perfect, but because you are still the bravest person I've ever known. You think you're weaker now, but to me, you've never been stronger." Leona didn't respond. His words cracked something open inside her, a wall she had spent 10 years building. "I know you're scared," Elias said softly. "So am I. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. On the days you can't step outside, I'll stay in with you. On the sleepless nights, I'll read to you. And for the dreams that were never finished, we'll paint them together." He knelt beside her and opened a velvet box. Inside was a simple platinum ring, set with a single sapphire, the color of the Portland sky the day they met. "I'm not proposing," he said, eyes steady. "I'm just asking if you're ready. Just for today, stay. Not forever, just today. And we'll start again, right from where we left off." Leona looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched the ring. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time, they carried a fragile hope. "Just today," she whispered. Elias smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "And tomorrow, if you still want to. Then tomorrow too." 1 year after they found each other again, Elias and Leona were married, not in a grand cathedral with vaulted ceilings and soaring choirs like 10 years ago, but in the quiet garden behind Leona's home. The same garden where she had planted wildflowers, practiced physical therapy, painted again, and day by day learned to believe she still deserved happiness. There were no hundreds of guests, no press cameras, no orchestra, just the people who truly mattered: family, close friends, and those who had witnessed the long, winding journey of love, heartbreak, and reunion. Leona didn't wear a traditional wedding gown. Instead, she worked with an adaptive fashion designer to create a dress that was soft, graceful, and hand-painted with her own brushstrokes. Her wheelchair was decorated with wildflowers, soft ribbons, and tiny handwritten notes from Elias tucked into the spokes, all saying, "I choose you, always." Elias, true to himself, wore a simple white shirt and carried a bouquet of flowers he had picked from their garden that morning. But to everyone present, he had never looked more grounded or more complete. When Leona was wheeled into the garden by her sister, Elias didn't wait at the altar. He walked forward to meet her halfway, just like they had always met in life. "Love isn't about leading or following," he whispered, gently touching her hand. "It's about choosing to meet in the middle every single day." There were no grand, rehearsed vows, just honest words spoken with hearts wide open. "I won't promise I'll always be strong," Leona said, voice trembling, "but I promise I'll never let go of your hand, even when life gets hard." "I won't promise I'll always get it right," Elias replied, his eyes damp. "But I promise I'll never stop trying to love you the way you deserve." They exchanged rings, the same sapphire ring from years ago, now with 3 added diamonds, one for the past, one for the present, and one for all the days still to come. When Elias slipped the ring on her finger, Leona smiled through tears. There was no grand reception afterward. Instead, they sat on the garden swing beneath the old oak tree, hand in hand, watching the sun set over the place where so many dreams had broken and been rebuilt. Leona rested her head on Elias's shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "I've drawn you so many times over these 10 years, but today is the first time I want to draw us in the future." Elias squeezed her hand and smiled. "Draw as many futures as you want," he said, "and I'll live every one of them with you." And as dusk wrapped the garden in quiet, they stayed there. No need for forever promises, because they knew love is choosing each other today, tomorrow, and every day after. And in Leona's next canvas, the first stroke was not of what had been, but of what was yet to come. And maybe one day, their child, or a child they chose to love, would ask them how they met. And they'd simply smile and say, "It started with a sketchbook and a rainy afternoon."